Hey everybody, it's Saran from Restored into New. In this video, I'm going to show you how I apply powder glaze with how you brush it on with a foam brush. The color I'm using on this sample piece of cabinet is called Truly Olive by Behr. There it is there. And it's kind of a bright green color, but when I apply the brown powder glaze over it, it's going to deepen the color quite a bit when I go to take it off. So I'm going to show you how I apply it. It's a very runny, kind of a watery type powder glaze. I'm going to apply it on and it dries in a powder kind of finish, and then we're going to sand it off. So let's get started. Just going to put a little bit on the foam brush. And apply it like so. It's really easy. And I always do this before I actually do the color on a piece of furniture, because I like to see exactly how it's going to turn out, because there's nothing worse than putting a color on with powder glaze on a piece of furniture and then realizing that you don't like it, and then you have to sand it all down and start over. So I always test out all of my ideas on a piece of spare cabinet door. And you can get this stuff at the Goodwill. You can get it at Habitat for Humanity. A lot of salvage stores have drawer pieces and cabinet pieces. So whenever I find those, I scoop them up, because you can get them for like $1 or less, depending on the type of material. Sometimes the oak ones can be $2 or $3. So again, I'm not trying to be totally neat here, because this is a sample piece. I just want to get a good idea of what it's going to look like when it goes on a piece of furniture. Getting all the creases here and the edges. And once I get it all covered, all the creases, then I'm going to go over the whole thing just to kind of make it look a little neater. Alright, so let's just go over this. Just lightly, you don't want to pull it back up. I missed a little spot here. Corners can be hard to get into sometimes. Just want to add a little bit more right here. Now, what I didn't do on this piece that I normally do on my furniture, I did not do primer underneath the color, which can make your color look a little bit different. But it's just a sample piece. I just want to get a good idea of what it's going to look like on the furniture, so I don't bother doing the priming process. Alright, so the powder glaze is on. We're going to let this dry. Powder glaze dries really fast. So this baby will be dry in about 30 to 45 minutes. But we're going to let it sit, and then later on we'll come back and I'll show you how I sand it off, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, our powder glaze has dried, and now we're going to sand off some of the powder glaze and leave some behind. I like to use Mirlon or 3M sanding pads in very fine. And we're going to just lightly take off the layers of powder glaze, and we're going to try to leave it in the creases and the parts where you normally don't see wear and tear, and we're going to take it off on the flat surfaces where you would see wear and tear. So I like to start in the center, because that's usually where I want it the lightest, and then I feather out to the ends. And as you see, the green is starting to come through. And this is where, you know, you do what you like, okay? Some people like to leave more powder glaze on, and some like to take most of it off and only leaving just a trace of it in the corners. But you just want to eyeball it as you go, and then just stop when you get to the point where you like it. I'm gonna zero in here a little bit so you can see. See that green coming through? Let me grab my rag, because as we go, you want to take off all the powder that's coming up. You want to take it off so you can kind of see what you're working with. Got most of it off here in the center, and now I'm going to start feathering it out at the ends. And to feather it, basically just as you get further and further out, you just press lighter and lighter. And it's something you just have to, over time, you just learn how to do it. So I press really hard in the center where I want most of the color to come through and the powder glaze to come off. And then I press a little bit lighter as I get further out, and then very light as I get out towards the edges. And again, keep wiping away the dust so you can see what you're working with. And again, when it looks how you want it to look, then you can stop. Sometimes I like to stand back and just kind of look at it for a minute and then my eye will kind of go to where I want to take off more powder glaze. If by any chance you take off more than you wanted, what you have to do is, and the great thing about powder glaze, you can spray it again. Just spray it over again with more powder glaze and start over. This is looking really good. So again, this is Truly Olive by Behr, and I always go with satin. Do not try to use flat paint, because if you do, the powder glaze is just going to soak up into the paint and you're not going to be able to sand it off. So you want to be able to use, satin or semi-gloss. I prefer satin. If you want to use a chalk paint, which is very porous like a flat paint, you have to spray over the paint with a poly, with a top coat. Then do your powder glaze. Because if you don't, you're not going to get that powder glaze off. All right, that looks pretty good. I like how that looks. Take off a little bit right here. Let me just go up a little bit more. Just a little bit. That looks good. All right, I'm going to finish up the edges here, and then when I come back, we are going to spray our top coat. Okay, we're back. I've got all the powder glaze taken off that I want off of the piece, and so now we're going to spray it with a top coat. You cannot use a brush to brush on the top coat just yet, because if you use a brush with a top coat on here, it's going to pull the powder glaze off, and so you have to spray it to set the powder glaze first. Then you can go over that with any type of top coat that you want. I prefer General Finishes the General Finishes Performance Top Coat and High Performance Top Coat, and I usually use flat or satin. On this piece I'm going to use satin, but to set it I'm going to use the polycrylic, Minwax Polycrylic. I'm going to use that in clear satin to set it. So let's do that. Let's get the edges. You want to make sure you totally cover the piece. I'm just checking to make sure I got it all. Let me get this over here. All right. All right, it is sprayed, and we're going to let that dry, and then I'll come back and show you the finished sample product. Okay guys, we have the top coat on, and let me show you the finished product. This is it here. Looks pretty, huh? Very Mediterranean looking. So just to recap, we used the color Truly Olive. It's a Behr color, but I use Sherwin-Williams Emerald Urethane Trim Enamel paint. It self-levels. It gives a great finish. I love it. But I did use a Behr color. So, but you can always take this and they will match it, and they can put it into the emerald, the Sherwin-Williams emerald paint. I did 2 coats of that. Now, I didn't do the primer on my sample piece, but if you were to do a piece of furniture, you want to prime your piece. You want to clean it really good, which is in my other video on how to prep a piece for painting. Look that video up on YouTube. So you want to do that first, and then you want to do 2 coats of primer, and then you want to do 2 coats of the paint. Then you want to do a coat of the powder glaze, and that is Valspar that does that, but I believe you have to order that. I don't think you can get it in Home Depot or Lowe's or one of those stores. I get mine through Amy Murry, and I believe her website is amymurry.com, and she also has a Facebook page, and you can order the powder glaze through her. And I'll post a link at the bottom on also another hardware store where I can get gallons of it if you want the gallons. I think she only sells the quarts, but when I need the gallons, I will give you the link below on the hardware store where I order that from online. So you want to do a coat of the powder glaze. Then, if you're not going to use a sprayer, you want to spray with a fine mist of the polycrylic clear satin, and just to set the powder glaze so it doesn't come up. Then you can use whatever top coat you want to use. I prefer to use General Finishes High Performance Top Coat in satin or flat. This I did in satin, but sometimes I do it in flat as well to finish it off. And you get this beautiful piece. Oh, the sanding paper. Mirlon sanding pads, you can get them on Amazon, or 3M makes a sanding pad as well, and get them in very fine. And you can cut them up into small pieces to get in the nooks and crannies. You can bend it and really get in there and get the powder glaze off, or you can use a bigger sheet for bigger areas to scrape the powder glaze off. And then just, you know, it's all about, you know, how you want it to look. I like to feather mine out a little bit, so I start heavy with the sanding in the center to really get the color to come through, and then I start to feather off and sand a little bit lighter on the edges until I get to the end where I want it to be all powder glaze. And this is what you get at the end, this beautiful finish. And you can do this on furniture, you can do it on cabinet, kitchen or bathroom cabinets, anywhere you want. And it's a beautiful finish. And oh, the powder glaze was Van Dyke Brown is the color that I used. So happy painting. This is Saran from Restored into New, and I'll see you in the next video.